Hello, I was just about to start watercolouring this illustration when I had an idea, which was to share the art books that I like to use for learning how to draw animals and creatures as well. I've been drawing tigers a lot recently, but I thought that it would be nice to go through both the educational books that I like to use and also the inspirational books. So I'm going to separate them into those two categories and talk a little bit about how I use them. I might do a dedicated video on how I actually learn from both my educational and inspiration art books, but for now, let's get into the educational ones. To start us off with, in the educational section, we have Fundamentals of Creature Design, how to create successful concepts using functionality, anatomy, colour, shape and scales. A very long title. This is especially useful for creature design, but it includes a lot of information on real world animals and creatures, because a lot of creating creatures is using real life things from nature. So we have discussions on how nature works and then how you can use that to create imaginary creatures. And then it goes into a whole section on animal anatomy, separated into sort of major animal groups. So you don't have like every single animal in here. It doesn't go over like every specific dolphin, every single whale. It gives some basic information on how each category works. So like we have lizard anatomy next, and then further sections on how to combine anatomy while also thinking about the environment that imaginary creature would be in, its life cycle. Is it prey or a predator, like I was showing in that section previously? And then towards the back, there's examples of, let's see if I can find it. There's examples of creatures that different artists have come up with and their process for doing so. So the animals that they actually used, and then some of the exploration of designing the creature. So this one is useful for both creature design and then also understanding animals a little bit. And this one is by 3D Total Publishing. So this is the most creature-based educational book that I have. The others are much more animal-based, as in real animals versus imaginary creatures. But I've put this one in here because I'm kind of covering both animals and creatures in this video. So yeah, that's the first one. Next up, we have one that I've talked about a lot on the channel before, which is the Wendling Guide to Drawing Cats. This book has been fundamental in my art studies for learning how to draw animals, not just cats, which this book covers in all their forms, both wild big cats, wild small cats, domestic cats. The things this book teaches you, or taught me, I have then been able to go on and apply to all sorts of different animals, because it teaches you fundamentals. It teaches you line of action, gesture, applying simple shapes on top of that to build form and to construct form. And then also it also covers anatomy and so on and so forth. It even goes into how to draw animals from life. And this book, before I go into it, is written by Jo Wendling. I really, really recommend, if you are into drawing animals, which I assume you are, if you are on this video, to check out Jo Wendling. Follow him on Instagram. I'm not sure what other platforms he's on, but that's the main one I follow him on. And he posts a lot of his zoo drawings. So literally what is in this book, how he applies all of this information in his own practice, it gets posted all over there, and it is so inspirational in terms of understanding how to apply that to your own practice. How I actually apply this kind of stuff to my practice, I'm gonna cover in its own book, so that's its own thing. But going into this book, the first few sections cover those basic fundamentals. So how to draw things from life, why you should draw from life, also drawing from pictures and videos as well. And then it goes into gesture, the line of action, construction, using simple shapes to build the animal over the gesture. So all of this is stuff that you can apply by learning cats, and then all of this is a fundamental. It's something you can apply to other animals as well. Moving on from those sections, we get to what I would start calling comparative anatomy. So one of the ways that a lot of people recommend that you learn how to draw animals, and of course there's many ways to learn, this is just one, is to pick a specific animal of different groups. So for felines, you would pick, for example here, a lion, and you study that one animal. And then by gaining a foundation, by studying, for example, a lion, you can then build off that foundation to understand tigers by comparing what you already know about lions to tigers. What's similar? What's different? The skull is actually a little bit different between a lion and a tiger. And you can take those similarities and differences by what you already know from the lion and then learn from there and start branching out. And that can be helpful for not being overwhelmed in terms of how many animals there are out there. If you have a baseline understanding of a lion to understand big cats, maybe a specific domestic cat to understand domestic cats, and then for canines you could think about learning from a wolf, and then from knowing a wolf you can start to think about all the different breeds of dogs there are out there, but also things like coyotes, foxes, and so on. I know foxes aren't exactly in that group, but they do have a lot of characteristics in that area, especially in terms of their skull. And then you can also think about learning a specific lizard. You could learn bearded dragons, and then from that you can understand differences and similarities between a bearded dragon and a gecko. But you're only really learning about one of each major kind of group, and then that kind of helps you at least start to build a foundation that you can build off of. That's the idea anyway, and this book does that by teaching you about lions first, and it teaches you about the fundamentals of cats by specifically going through a lion. And then it goes into tigers, how they're different from lions, how they're similar to lions. And of course you might think, well, yeah, they're striped. It's not just in terms of that they're striped, it can also be in terms of, if for example, cheetah is a very good example actually. Cheetah are very, very different from a lion. You can see it just by its body shape, right? If we look at the skull is a lot rounder, and it's almost a bit more like a domestic cat in shape. And you can also consider things like how the muscles are the same, again using comparative anatomy. The muscles actually inside the leg are the same as in a lion, but how they're shaped is different because of the function that a cheetah needs to have in order to function as a cheetah compared to what a lion needs to function as a lion. So this book goes into all of that for all sorts of different cats. And then we get to the section on domestic cats, and it goes into how to deal with short hair, long hair, kittens, different kinds of breeds of domestic cats. So we've got, you know, like your Burmese, I think, is in here, Himalayans. Yeah, Burmese is there. And again, it's all about learning through simple shapes, through gesture, and a lot of simple concepts that you can then build off of by doing your gesture, by doing your simple shapes, and then you can start thinking about texture on top of that. So this book is, I have beaten this book up by how much I've used it. It's constantly by my side because I am using it all the time. I love this book. He does also have a book on which is the Wendling Guide to Drawing Animals. I don't have that book. I'd imagine that it's very similar in its teaching in terms of the fundamentals, but gets just applied to a wider variety of animals. I absolutely adore this book though. And next up we have an atlas of animal anatomy for artists. This is actually the first book that I ever got on drawing animals. This I wouldn't really say is gonna guide you on how to draw animals. This is a lot more of a resource. This is where I would go to find pictures of anatomy to study from. So this isn't really going to sit you down and teach you in terms of explaining, okay, go do this, this and this, which is a little bit more like the guide to cat drawing. This is a lot more sciencey, a lot more sort of science plates that you sit down and study from. We've got a few different animals in here as well. Since we were just talking about them, here's the one for the lion. And speaking on comparative anatomy, here's my, this is a resin replica, it is not a real skull. And if I can hold it so that, I'm just going to remove the jaw, there we go. So that's a lion skull and then a domestic cat skull. And so you can see that the similarities and also differences. Put that back on. There we go. So this book is, it's been useful to me, but I wouldn't say that this is like as much of a drawing, what's the word, like I'm trying to think of just a word that encapsulates the previous book. It isn't a fundamentally mind-blowing experience as the previous book was for me, but it still has its value. And it has a much wider application in terms of it has multiple different animals. It has big cats, it has horses, it has dogs, but it is a lot more of like a, almost like a medical text, really, more than sitting you down and teaching you general fundamentals. It's a lot more of just anatomy in its most anatomy sense. Anatomy in its most anatomy sense. But I still appreciate it, and it has been helpful to me. So that's the third educational book on animal and creature drawing that I have. Now we are on to the inspiration section, and we're starting off with creatures again. I'm going to go over 3 inspiration books that cover creatures and animals. Starting off with this one, which is Sketching from the Imagination, Creatures and Monsters, and it is well loved, well used, and even tea-stained. This, if you're not familiar with Sketching from the Imagination books, they're all very similar in shape, kind of squarish, very thick, and they're a compilation of multiple artists, all under one subject. So this is the Creatures and Monsters book. There's also a book on fantasy that I have, and one on characters. But we're gonna look at this one first. So it goes over the artist and then all of their inspirations and advice and the materials they use for sketching, the techniques they use, little tidbits of advice and information, and then all of their sketches. And one reason why I love these books in general is because you get such a wide variety of different artists and how they all approach the same subject with similarities, differences, and so on and so forth. And it's very inspiring because through these books, in comparison to the educational ones that I showed you, these ones are showing you how artists have applied all of that educational material, and just how wide of a careful not to knock that, how wide of a variety there really is. And even in like just the in terms of materials, there's traditional artists in here that use all sorts of different materials. There's digital artists. They might all have different, well, of course they have different styles, but they all have different approaches to drawing. And they go over their inspirations, their advice. Overall, very, very nice. So this one is this artist here. A very, very helpful resource for me in terms of inspiration. Now, how I use these books for inspiration, I'm going to go over in the how I learn from these video. But for now, this is one of the books that inspires me in terms of creatures and kind of animals as well. Kind of like the first book I showed that was educational. This goes into, again, how people use real world animals, nature, etc. to create creatures. So this is like education in practice. Next up we have Iguana Bay 2.0 by Claire Wendling, and I'm just covering up for YouTube. This is an amazing resource for inspiration for animals, also figure drawing as well. One thing that it inspires me with as well is that on one page you have her sketches and drawings from, I think it's like 15 years or something. It's a long time anyway between these drawings and then her reinterpretation of them. And you can kind of see her skill, knowledge and style evolve, which is inspiring to see as well, because it's something you can see in your own work if you go back and look at your transition and how you grow and change over time too. It's inspiring to see it in other artists as well. But in this book, one reason why I love it so much is that there's a lot of cats. I'm just trying to be a little bit careful because of, again, there's things in here that YouTube would probably want me to censor. Let me try and get to here we go, some cats. So of course, in terms of cat drawing, this is really useful for me. And again, you get to see the evolution over time. One thing that I love with Claire Wendling is her use of lines. And when she shades almost sort of like this whimsical fluidity to her line work is very nice, and it's something that I study from in terms of learning and improving my own line work, learning about and improving my own line work. So this is again, being careful. This is one of the books that inspires me in terms of animal drawing. It's mainly big cats and horses in here, but also some creatures as well, because she does things like centaurs and a few like bird-ish creatures too. For the final book, we kind of have an odd one maybe. I was wondering whether to show this one because it's not something that you can probably easily find, but at the same time this is something that is very inspiring to me, so I decided to show it anyway because that's what this video is about in terms of the inspiration section. This is a book that I picked up when visiting the Alnwick castle, and It's a sketchbook that's almost like it talks through how the grounds were designed, because all of the park, so all of the country park area around the castle, was actually designed by a landscaper, and it goes into all of that. So it's great for environments as well, but there's a lot of sketches in this of wildlife too, and that's what I find really inspiring in terms of animal drawing from this book. And one thing I love with this is the wild use of materials. The fact that the artist goes from material to material constantly. It uses pencil, ballpoint pen, watercolors, oils. I think there's an acrylic paint in here as well. And just the wide variety of materials that the artist uses is also very inspiring to me. I love seeing how an artist manages to branch out and into multiple mediums, yet also have an undercurrent of their style and their voice underneath as well. So very, very inspiring to me. But again, it isn't really a book that you just find in your bookstore. I don't know if you can pick this up online. Again, I picked this up when we actually visited the castle grounds, but it is something that is very inspirational to me in my practice, so I thought I would share it with you. And there we have it. That's a mixture of books that I find useful in my art practice, both educational and inspirational. Again, I'm probably going to do a video that goes over how I apply these in practice, so how I learn from educational art books and how I learn from inspirational art books, because I do have a different approach for both, because they are both different. I'll probably do that kind of similarly to the video that I did about how I learn from videos, which a lot of you did find helpful, so hopefully that'll be helpful to you too, learning about how I learn from books. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite books are. Do you have particular ones that you always go towards, like I go towards this all the time? Do you have a particular book that you'd love for inspiration as well? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye!